happening in the church in China is very interesting, because on one level, it's a rebuke to what I see going on in the West right now. And even reading Wang Yi's words, knowing this man is going to prison, it had a very Bonhoefferian ring to it, and how he went about it. But let's get to him. Let's talk about Wang Yi. Who is Wang Yi?
He is probably one of the most well-known house church pastors in China today. He's, I would say, one of the few house church pastors with name recognition outside of China, for sure. And a lot of that was due to his arrest, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I think even before his arrest, a lot of people had some idea of who he was. And part of that is just he's a very, very talented guy. So before he became a Christian, he was a human rights lawyer and scholar. And he was also a very avid writer. He was very active on the Chinese internet, very active writing on various prominent blogs, and he had a pretty large social media following, and he is a really gifted writer. I think he's very winsome in his words. He's really, one of the things that I think is interesting is it's not easy to be as interesting a writer when you're translated as I think he is, and so I think that the best writers are the people who are interesting to read, whatever language you're reading them in. There are a lot of people who in their own language are quite compelling, and when you translate them, it loses some of its vitality, but he became a Christian later in life. He was already, established as a thinker in China when he became a Christian. I've tried to think of, what kind of a parallel would be. I think it would essentially be, if some name, someone who wrote for, say, the New York Times, became a Christian very publicly. That's essentially what it would be like, and we haven't really seen that happen in the US in a long time. So this is someone who, was already a recognized thinker and scholar and intellectual who became a Christian. Very quickly after he converted, he began pastoring. He became a Christian essentially through his wife. She became a Christian first. And then they very quickly got involved in Christian ministry, and he became a pastor. They are in Chengdu, which is southwest China. So, it's not on the coast. In China, the coastal cities are really the kind of big, prominent leading cities. And the further west you go, kind of the more it's, less elite, you could say. But Chengdu is kind of the leading city in southwest China. If you like Sichuan food, that's where Chengdu is. All the good spicy food in China comes from that area. And so they started a church called Early Rain. It had a few different variations of the name, but its official name now is Early Rain Covenant Church. And they were a very public house church. So they're everything that is not what we might imagine of a house church. They met publicly. They were very prominent online. They really were not hidden or hiding in any way. And they sought to be very engaged in their city. I don't think I mentioned this anywhere in the book, but for example, One thing they would do is every Christmas they would have a very large Christmas concert, essentially,
Hmm.
in a large rented venue, and invite anyone to come to it. And yeah, they grew to be very large. In 2018, when Wang Yi was arrested,
Is that how you
they
say it? Wang Yi?
yeah, Wang Yi.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wang Yi. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. They had probably about 600 people attending, and they had planted multiple churches across Chengdu. And they also were involved in starting a lot of different Christian education initiatives. So, again, this is not a small hidden thing. This is a very socially and publicly engaged expression of the church in China. So, yeah, as the book highlights, though, that of course created conflict. That was a decision that they felt very led to, but it definitely created conflict with the governing authorities. And I think especially, up until 2018, the trend had been increased openness for the churches in China. They were not the only church that large. There were, several churches in coastal cities and places like Beijing or further south in Southeast China that were just that large or even larger. And it had seemed like that was going to be the continued trajectory for the house churches. There were several house churches that were trying to kind of broker a middle path with the government, basically trying to argue that they could somehow register with the government without submitting to the state church, the Three Self Church. But in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, a new set of religious regulations began to be enforced. And this, is ongoing today, and it basically has led to a pretty significant increase in persecution of house churches across China. Wang Yi's arrest and the crackdown at Early Rain was a really significant sign that a more difficult time for the churches was coming. It was kind of a big, you could probably say it was a big show of power on behalf of the state. And it was a very big event. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to go into the details of what happened in the arrest.